Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Hoar. I'm the CEO of Paradigm B2B, my research and advisory services firm. I'm also the co-founder of Master B2B, which is a global community of 50,000 B2B e-commerce professionals. So for those of you who know, last week I spoke with the CEO of VTEX, Mariano Gomide, in his first broadcast interview since announcing that VTEX would be stepping away from the MACH Alliance. So Mariano and I talked at length about his critique of the MACH Alliance, his concerns about the direction of the organization, et cetera. And this week, I wanted to get the MACH Alliance's reaction. So we're going to go and hear today from the MACH Alliance leadership and understand their perspective on this all. So like I said, about a week ago, I had a conversation with Mariano, and he laid out some very specific criticisms. In particular, he referred to the announcement from late March that they were leaving the alliance, and he said it was because of some general things, but also some specific things. And he kind of had like a call to action, which we'll get to in a moment, around some reforms that he wants to see happen in the MACH Alliance. And then if those things were to happen, he may consider having VTEX rejoin, assuming the MACH Alliance would have them join again. But like I said, what I wanted to do today was get the MACH Alliance's reaction. So one of the things that Mariano said, which I think sort of encapsulated his position on this, is that, in quote, the MACH Alliance served its purpose in breaking us, meaning the industry, free from monolithic thinking. And then he concluded by saying, now it's time to break free from the MACH dogma itself. So his allegation is that the MACH is, as the old joke goes, a cause becomes a movement and a movement becomes a racket. I think his phraseology here is that the MACH started out with the noblest and purest of intentions, and the alliance has sort of, in a way, kind of lost its way. At least that's his criticism. So again, what I want to do here today is hear from the other side. So fortunately, I was able to secure an interview here with Casper Rasmussen, who is the president of the MACH Alliance. He also happens to be the group chief transformation officer at Valtech, which is a systems integrator. Why does that matter? Well, one of Mariano's pointed criticisms is that the leadership of the MACH Alliance is now too heavily dominated by SIs. So we're really fortunate today to have Casper join us. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Casper in. So welcome, Casper.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us, Andy. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to get your reaction to some of the specific things that Mariano referred to. So let me bring that back on screen. But first of all, tell us, remind us all what the MACH Alliance is.
So it's honestly quite simple. The MACH Alliance is a not-for-profit organization that are advocating for open, connected, and composable approaches to digital execution and strategy. It's a facilitator, it's a learning platform, it provides best practice and guidance, and it has a thriving community of practitioners and ambassadors that understand exactly how to achieve the freedom and the flexibility that MACH offers. It's a membership organization. We've exceeded 115 members. We span across 36 different categories of technology. And when you think about it this way, certified companies is fundamentally a short list of the options you can rely on as an end user if you're looking to achieve speed to value. The MACH Alliance originated from acronym thinking, microservices-based, API-first, cloud-native, and headless, and it's now rooted in the principles of composability, connectedness, open, and also autonomy, which fundamentally also aims to bridge both the mindset and the architecture approach that is required to succeed.
So the word MACH, I think, was coined by, or at least this is the folklore, by Commerce Tools in 2019, as I recall, and the MACH Alliance was formed in 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so the MACH Alliance was formed in 2020, and as I recall, VTEX joined in 2021. So they were one of the founding members, so to speak. And at the time, Mariano said they really believed in the cause. But as you just saw on screen, I had his quote, and he seems to feel as though you guys have lost your way. I did this with Mariano last week, and I wanted to do this with you as well. I reached out to people I know in the MACH Alliance, and I said, hey, VTEX had some specific critique of the MACH Alliance. And I wanted to get their take and see if there was any truth in any of that. So I wanted to put some comments on screen about some of the things that people who are in the MACH Alliance, I call this the MACH member confessional, share with me, where they think that VTEX may actually have a point. And then we'll try and talk about some of the specific criticism. So if you would, give me a sense for what your reaction to this is. And I'll read them for people listening. So one person said, the MACH Alliance has become too marketing heavy. There have been some bad MACH implementations. I think that's probably not unusual and not unexpected, but I want to get your reaction to that. And then lastly, and this is the one I think that maybe goes specifically to your dual role as the head of the MACH Alliance, but also an executive at an SI. This person said, some large SIs have hurt the MACH value proposition by leaning into the complexity argument, and as a result, creating a misalignment of incentives. So let me just pause here and get your thoughts on each of the three, any of the three, all of the three.
Yeah, so let's maybe start out with the elephant in the room, the failed implementations. And I would argue and say, of course, there are failed implementations or bad implementations. It's everywhere, right? MACH and outside of MACH. And some are due to poor strategy, meaning doing the wrong thing, and others are due to poor execution, doing it wrong. And you can call this a funny perspective to have, but honestly, if there weren't any bad implementations, we as an industry wouldn't be progressing. This is all about advancing the industry. It's all about advancing technology. It's all about front running and creating new approaches and new philosophies. If there were no bad MACH implementations, we would be stagnating. We would be looking backwards instead of forwards. So I truly believe that, of course, there needs to be bad implementations. There needs to be transform by doing, and there needs to be an innovation mindset to it. And that is definitely something that we, I wouldn't say are proud of, but that is the reality of the type of business that we're in and the type of industry that we represent.
Okay, what about to the point of the SIs? As an SI, what's your argument? What's your counter argument to this criticism that the SIs are, I'm going to oversimplify and for effect, put it this way. The SIs are in charge. They've taken the MACH toolkit. They've leaned into the complexity of it. They make more money by having longer, more involved engagements. And in a sense, it's polluted the idea that MACH was supposed to be simple and easy. What's your reaction to that? Again, to my characterization of it, but what's your reaction to that?
So I think it's a very simplistic mindset, first and foremost, because being an SI and simply being an executor isn't enough. Just being good at agile, being good at UX, and having tech expertise is not enough to succeed with clients and be the partner that they need. And honestly, T&M is dead. That commercial model, it doesn't happen as frequently as people think. So I think the mindset that goes in here in SIs being able to exploit complexity to basically drive and start to monetize further is traditional, if I may put it. What clients really need these days is a partner that make the future real. And they need a they need a partner who empowers and don't overpower as they do that. And true partners to clients take mutual accountability, meaning we measure our own impacts, and we also do outcome-driven contracts. What SIs of the next era, or even I would argue of the current era, need to possess more than anything is creativity. They need to believe in value realization, which is also the fundamental principle and philosophy behind MACH. And then there needs to be a big focus on enablement to make sure that it's not forever and also infinite. So I think, yes, you could argue and say that the value prop is creating a misalignment of incentives, but I think it's a very traditional mindset because that's not how the SI of today actually operates with clients. Our clients have expectations too. We have contracts and responsibilities, and we're being measured on impact, not outcome. Not output.
So I forgot to mention this one up as well, but I did hear from some people I talked to that they argue that the MACH Alliance should have a different proportion of end user clients, buyers of technology, where it's more heavily dominated by the vendors. and the SIs, so the platforms, the point solutions, and the SIs, and not enough voices being heard from the people buying the technology. What's your thought on that?
So I will admit and say there is more to do, first and foremost, but I will also say that we've progressed quite significantly in blending end users into both our execution and into our strategy. First and foremost, within our governance, we have industry advisory boards where we have ambassadors and actual practitioners of the industry, meaning industry leaders participate to set the strategy of the alliance. And this is where they hold ourselves accountable to the actual impact that we create. We've also recently loosened up our governance, meaning our executive board now also comprise of end user industry leadership. So it's not just members, nor is it technology, whether it's SIs or ISVs and enablers anymore. And then from an execution standpoint, all of our task forces are open. There is a blend of end user and also member. And that is, of course, where the actual magic happens. You could go in and, for instance, have a look at what we're doing around MACH, which is our learning and enablement program, both around the mindset and the architecture of MACH. And this is driven by, for instance, Dylan from Abbott. And there are also plenty of examples of some of the interoperability work that we're doing, for instance, with the launch of the new open data model from the MACH Alliance, which is also, again, co-created with the industry in itself. So again, there is more to do, but we have progressed, and it is something that we've committed to, making ourselves end-user-centric and end-user-led as an organization. It is simply about progressing and getting there.
And I think isn't the case that the chairman of the MACH Alliance is a non-vendor?
Correct. Yes. Bob is the chairperson of the alliance, and he's an industry veteran. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Bob, actually. He used to be CDO at Don Foods, right? So
Correct.
yeah, good guy. All right, so let's get to Mariano's more specific critique. So there are 5 or 6 things that he talked about, that we talked about last week, that he brought up, and these are the specific areas that he wanted to bring to the surface. And I'm going to read them, and you can react to them in whole or in part, but I want to get your thoughts on this. So one thing is, he said that in his opinion, the MACH Alliance has too rigid an approach, and that the approach actually requires heavy customization. His argument, too much customization, to the point earlier about the SIs, the misincentive or misalignment of incentives. He also said that there are limited number of out-of-the-box connections, that there should be more sort of plug and play about the MACH Alliance, as opposed to, more configuration, less customization. He also said that, in his opinion, it's too expensive, takes too long to implement, to do mock implementations. I mentioned this to you earlier about his claim is that the MACH Alliance has become a marketing club now. And in fact, some people refer to it as a mock eating club, which is sort of a clever way to think about it. And then the last one, which I think is the most pointed criticism he has, is that the MACH Alliance is dominated by SIs who are incented to monetize complexity. Now, you talked a little bit about that earlier. So I'll let you tackle 1, 2, all of these collectively, however you want to go down the list. But what is your reaction? What do you make of what Mariano said here very specifically?
So let me first and foremost try and just elevate it slightly. And I also want to backtrack just for a minute. His early statement and his first statement was that we served our purpose. There is no more monolithic thinking. MACH is the standard. That in itself, I think, is evidence to impact, and something that obviously we're incredibly proud of, but there is much more to do. As he's saying himself, it's harder than ever to be a retailer because of all of the geopolitical tensions and a lot of the uncertainty in the world. And AI is also coming in and further complicating and proliferating the actual technology environment. So the MACH Alliance is not done. This is all about us progressing and moving on from what we set out to do in the first place. I also want to make it clear, and Mariano knows this because him and I have had some conversations as well. We're sad to see them leave the MACH Alliance. And I think a lot of this debate and a lot of this conversation is healthy. And honestly, I thank him for creating it in the first place. To me, that's ultimately evidence of a community that's flourishing. People care about MACH. People care about the impact that we've had. And there is always more to do. Any business out there, there's always more you could do. And people holding us accountable, that is what we want in this industry. I though also want to call out that getting stuck in a PR stunt isn't fun. And honestly, what we need right now as an industry is cooperation more than anything. It's what an alliance is all about. It's allyship at the end of the day. And I think that's also why simply having dialogue around some of these key points, finding ways to progress and finding ways to serve who we ultimately serve, the end user, is important. And in that, I also want to make something extremely clear, because there is an undertone to a lot of this that comes from Mariano. Who are you serving? Are you serving the SIs and then monetizing further, or are you serving the members more holistically? We're actually serving the end user and the business that they represent. That is what we exist to do. We're an industry association. We're not commercial company. We have no shareholders, and we reinvest everything into the education and the progression of what those end users actually need to succeed. And I think that's a very, very important point for us to get through, to make sure that we're not skewing towards there being any type of hidden agendas in a lot of this. Also, what I want to call out is that there is a lot behind the statements that Mariano is making. And here you're only mentioning a few of them, to be honest. One thing is the difficulty of the business environment. I mentioned it briefly. These geopolitical tensions are cultivating what we consider being localized competition over global cooperation, meaning it's actually more complicated now than ever to be a retailer. And the expectation is it's only going to be more complicated in the future too. And when that is the case, what we need to do is to put the end user at the center. And this is not about serving anyone but the end user and their interests. But in what he's referring to here, there is also a lot of focus on technology, high cost to implementation. It should be 2 months instead of 12 months. But the real question should actually be, how do we accelerate impact for the end user? Because you could call time to market or cost of implementation a means to an end. Where is the growth? Where is the customer experience? And where is the business impact in that? Some of the basic philosophies we have when you're talking about accelerating impact is, of course, the notion of composing, buy and build. And this is about accelerating through commodities and thereby create more room for creativity and innovation, actually make an impact for business and not make a difference for the end user. And we also believe that a lot of what is needed out in the market, which is also what we start to see the evidence of, is that we're now starting to enter a post-accelerator era, where true composability, connectivity, and openness really make AI thrive. And AI also becomes a way for us to achieve exactly the speed to market and that operator mindset that he's asking for too.
Yeah, if I could, sorry, Casper, if I could go back to something you said, I don't mean to cut you off there, but I wanted to make sure we talked about this. You used a phrase that others have used, and I presented this to Mariano as well last week. You referred to it as a PR stunt. What was your reaction to the way in which it was done? Because Mariano did say that he's been raising these issues in the MACH Alliance for some time now. I don't know if you felt like he wasn't getting the answers he wanted, or if he was getting the answers, but he didn't like them. I don't know what it was, but I think it did sort of come out of nowhere. And it seems like it was timed pretty well. But what was your reaction as the person on the other end of this receiving this? First of all, were you surprised when you received it? Was the timing a surprise to you?
The timing wasn't a surprise to me, right? Because Shop Talk is a place where the industry listens. And obviously, that's a very good time for activation, especially if you're looking to gain eyeballs. What surprised me the most was, and I alluded to this early on, I think what we need as an industry is cooperation. And we need to create debate and we need to create dialogue openly. And I think that is what we need to find again. And I don't think necessarily the way that Mariano executed and activated his perspectives and opinions was in spirit of that. So I agree on the underlying intent of needing to make more impacts with our end users. I agree on the underlying intent of making technology simpler and easier for implementation. And I agree on the underlying intent of the MACH Alliance being able to make a huge impact in this. But obviously, I think the fact is that that requires cooperation. It's something we only do better if we do it together, as the basic premise and the basic philosophy of it. And I think that's what we need to find back to. So what I could say is, I think there is a lot of sanity in what Mariano is arguing for, and a lot of what he's requesting and asking, because I believe in the premise. Like, I also talk to retailers each and every day, and I also see how difficult it is for them to actually operate, run, and grow their business. But at the same time, I also think that furthering the agenda that he's asking for here requires the cooperation, because the MACH Alliance is and can be the platform where it happens. And then obviously, I would also argue and say that there is a lot of misconception at play here with what the MACH Alliance is doing. The fact that it's referring to, I would call it a older stage, or maybe a 3-year historical point in time of what the MACH Alliance stood for, and we've progressed and we've come far on some of those basic philosophies that he was referring to as well.
So I'm going to hit two things here, and then I think we'll probably have to wrap up. But when is this limited out-of-the-box connections? I think Mariano's point is that it's still not exactly the quote-unquote plug-and-play approach that was sort of promised to people.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're in the MACH Alliance, it should be pretty easy to grab an e-commerce platform and a PIM and a search technology and all work in this MACH wonder world. And I'm kind of curious what you think about that. Is his criticism at all valid, that it's still too hard to piece these things together, or is that a misunderstanding, you think?
There is some validity to the argument. Let me make that clear. And even this week, we launched the open data model, which is an initiative to actually clarify the data exchange and some of the interoperability standards that systems need in order to integrate. And I also strongly believe, and I see this in the practice of the work that we do with clients, that hyperscalers and event architectures play a major role in composing and orchestrating the type of architecture that we're arguing for here. So yes, there is work to be done. Could it be simpler? Absolutely. But there are also plenty of technologies that you can take down from the shelf and actually use in order to make sure that these systems do integrate and do connect and interoperate. And in this, I would argue and say the hyperscalers and also event architectures, as an example, are standard types of technology that end users and retailers often use in order to do so. And then I also believe, and this is a strong opinion that I have, is that any retailer, or you could argue and say any business, period, should care about data residency and data ownership. And this is something that they need to be in full control of, especially, again, as some of these geopolitical tensions create that tribe-like mindset that we see in the world, where inter-region trade, for instance, starts to actually diminish. And that also means that there is an increased competition regions in between. And that also means a retailer or a business holistically needs to be in full control of the actual data they have and where it resides. And that is where you also want to make sure that you actually own a lot of the integration technology that sits behind the scenes.
So last point here about this marketing club allegation. I did hear that from people I talked to, that, and maybe some of this is just natural because you're promoting the interests of the MACH Alliance. There has to be some dimension of that. But is there some validity to the criticism that it started out as one thing and it's become something else, and it's more dominated by the marketing side of it, and that's become a little too promotion heavy? Or do you feel like you've got the right balance there still?
I do truly believe we have the right balance, and it's actually fun because I haven't heard that for about a few years. Originally, early on, we heard it a lot, that it's all about marketing and nothing about execution. And if you were to look, for instance, into our annual report, you also see that marketing is where we invest the least in the way we actually execute and operate. Like, some of our true priorities lie on easing the path to true composability. This is where RightMark come in, architect certification, which also launched this week. So we could also choose to celebrate some of the early on architects that have actually certified in MACH expertise, and then also investments around easing procurement and increasing discoverability of actual solutions that you can compose. And then we also have a huge focus around supercharging our communities. And this is not for the sake of the member. This is about connecting practitioners and connecting end users to make sure that they cooperate, again, the word cooperate, in the journey that they're going through. So Marketing club, I would argue and say no. Of course, we have a strong brand, we have a strong voice, we're known to be an authoritative in the space, but our focus and our investment goes elsewhere, and that is into, honestly, what Mariano is also asking for, us standing by and standing right for the end user and making sure that they succeed in what they have started.
Well, that's a good point to end on. So, Casper, I want to thank you for joining me today. I know that you're on holiday right now. You're dialing in from Copenhagen. It's late on a Friday, I think, although I'm not sure when we're actually taping this. But no, I do want to thank you for coming in and answering the questions candidly. And I hope this was helpful for people who are interested in this issue. I think it's important to hear both sides of the argument. And I want to thank you for being a part of this. So thanks once again.
Of course. No, thank you.
So again, thank you to Casper Rasmussen for joining today. I think you'll learn quite a bit from listening to his comments. I think it was helpful for him to acknowledge that perhaps there are areas that need to be improved, but also to clarify what could be misconceptions in the space. So again, thanks again, Casper, for doing that. Just in closing here, I mentioned this at the beginning that I'm the CEO of Paradigm B2B. I think some of you know who that is, what that company does. But for those of you who don't know, I'm an analyst at heart. I was an analyst at Forrester for 7 years. And so I cover the industry. I evaluate technology platforms. I consult with all manner of manufacturers and distributors about their digital strategy. And on screen right now, you're seeing the latest iteration of my platform evaluation. In fact, this is going to be refreshed in a couple of months. It's called the Combine. And it's my sort of alternative to the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave. I have a different approach. I'm not looking for the decathletes. I'm looking for the athletes. And I call out where people are strong and weak. And I'm not looking for a composite score. And I don't look for just leaders and then what I call the leader-loser metaphor. I think when buyers are buying technology, they're looking for strengths and weaknesses and things that match up with their capabilities. And to that point, I'm launching something here shortly called the eCombine, which is an interactive version of this, where you can actually select the areas that you're interested in as a technology buyer, and I will match you up algorithmically with my research says would be a best fit. I also mentioned at the top that I am a co-founder of Master B2B, which is a global community of B2B e-commerce practitioners and professionals. Every Friday, we do a podcast. This podcast is my Paradigm podcast, but my partner Brian and I also do a Master B2B podcast called the Friday 15, where we tackle an issue and we address it in 15 minutes or fewer. We are horrible for finishing within 15 minutes. That's sort of the joke, but hopefully it's worth it because you can listen to it or watch it wherever you get your podcasts. Just very quickly about Master B2B beyond that, because we have a couple of events coming up. We run in-person dinners all around the United States. Here are a couple of roundtables that we have coming up. We're doing, I think, 9 or 10 this year. We have 3 coming up in May, one in New York on May 7th, one in Minneapolis on May 14th, and one in Los Angeles on May 14th as well. And then a series of roundtables coming up later this year. These are 15 to 20 person executive roundtables where we spend 5 to 6 hours discussing an issue in depth, and we mix in some fun with drinks and dinner as well. We just had this in March, and we will be doing it again next year because we're on our 3rd annual version of it, but it's the Master B2B Summit. We have over 100 individuals who join us from all around the world, and it's an academic-like environment. It's at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. You can see on screen here, we have classroom activities. We do small group discussions. We do a lot of in-person networking and a lot of best practices sharing. So another great event. You can see all this on LinkedIn. Lastly, we publish research. People don't know this. On screen, you can see it was 4 or 5 reports that we've done. These tend to be 15 to 20 pages long, in-depth surveys that we do. We do in-depth interviews with our community. We have a community of over 600 individuals who are active and to whom and with whom we get research information. Then we do smaller versions of this, what we call quick takes, which are 3 to 5 page kind of point solution reports, and we do those all throughout the year. We also do webcasts associated with this. There's a lot we got going on here, but you're seeing a trend here, which is around thought leadership. And then I mentioned this global community. Here's some of the individuals who are members of our community. This is just a snapshot, but you can see they're senior level individuals at all the B2B manufacturers and distributors of note. So on that note, I will conclude by saying, once again, if you don't listen to our podcast from Master B2B, you should. It's entertaining, it's educational, and we do them every Friday. So on that note, I would once again like to thank Casper Rasmussen for coming on and answering some questions very honestly and forthrightly. And until next time, we'll see you soon.